Hello everyone, I hope you've been doing very well. I have not uploaded any videos recently, not because there haven't been things to talk about, because there have, just because I've been really busy working. And that is going to be kind of the topic I want to talk about here, because there seems to be, anecdotally, and I've heard reports of this in other places, something of a labor shortage. People are not working. I started hearing about this on the news, and then I started experiencing it whenever I would go out to get food at fast food restaurants. Very long lines, signs posted, "We don't have workers, we don't have any workers." There's only, I went and got lunch yesterday at a Burger King in a neighboring town, and they had a sign saying that there was only one person working before 11 a.m. And I worked at Burger King in high school at a not even that busy of a store, and we would probably have two people in at 5, a third person in at 6, a fourth person in at 7, like 2 or 3 more people in at 8, and like maybe 3 or 4 more people at 11, and nobody would go home before 1. So that's just insane, and that's been happening at several places that I go. I've been working. I got a tip on a new job, a decent job, pays a decent amount of money by most people's standards. And I called them up, and they were like, "Yeah, definitely, definitely." And I said, "Well, you're getting a lot of people asking." And they said, "No, it's dead. Nobody wants a job. This is a good job and not a particularly difficult one. It pays $350 a day to drive your car. Right? It's not that hard." And the owner was like, "Nobody's asking. They were not even sure they'd be able to do it because so few people would be interested." And I have a friend who's a manager at a Walmart. He says typically he does the front cashier areas. He goes, typically the way it's set up, the way that they're organized, there's supposed to be 4 managers. He goes, there are 2. The other 2 quit to go on unemployment, and they cannot replace them. And he says they get applications, and he's someone who's able to hire, and he is trying to call these people, and they won't reply. They'll say that they don't want it. And so he says that they can still claim unemployment and say, "Well, I'm looking for work," but they don't actually want a job because they're getting unemployment. So this is an obvious, logical fact. If you pay people not to work, more people are not going to work. And if you pay them low enough, then the incentive to not work will be minimal, and you're only going to have the most marginal people, right? There's some people who are going to be willing, who are going to be they're going to place such a high value on being lazy that even a very small stipend from the state will be enough to keep them from working. But that's not going to be most people. But every increment that you increase it, every time you increase that amount, you get a larger and larger number of people who are doing it. And it gets to a point where it actually becomes, in the short term, stupid to work. All right, why should you work? Why should you give forth effort if you can get the same amount for not working, or maybe not the same amount, but if you can get 80% or 70% or 50% as much for 0 hours as you do for working 20, 30, 40 hours a week, then there's a big disincentive. And so you see this now, that a lot of people are not working, and a lot of businesses are having trouble. Now, the people who are on unemployment are still consumers, right? They're taking that money, and unless they are subsistence farmers who are making everything themselves, which, let's face it, if they're being that lazy that they don't want to even be a wage laborer, they're not going to have the initiative, with maybe extremely rare exceptions, to grow their own food. They're still going to eat, they're still going to buy things, they're still going to be spending that money. And so it wouldn't surprise me if this actually pushes wages up. But in the short term, I can totally appreciate someone's offering you money to not work. I mean, this kind of is a great indictment, though, of this idea of a universal basic income, or the big critique, the defense, the assertion of welfare advocates for all these years is that it doesn't have any negative effect, that people on welfare desperately want to work, and that we're just giving them a safety net so they don't die or live miserably or become homeless. But there's no way that it would actually incentivize people to be lazy. Well, there is such a thing as worthy poor. There are people who actually can't work, the so-called worthy poor, people who by no fault of their own are incapable of making a living. Those people do exist, but they're only a very, very small fraction, a tiny fraction of the people who are receiving assistance of any kind. Most of those people can work. Some of them maybe can't work a lot. I mean, some of those people maybe not have very high skills, and the amount that they could earn in the workforce would be small, although not zero. And the amounts that you need to live are not large. I mean, we can start saying, well, you need Wi-Fi, blah, blah, blah. No, to earn enough that you can have calories enough to keep you alive is very, very low. And to earn enough to keep a roof over your head and clothing, it's higher, but it's not that high. You can do it on less than minimum wage. Okay. And but yeah, it's obvious that if you pay people not to work, more people are not going to work, and you almost have to be stupid. But this reminds me of a very famous test. Maybe you've heard of this test. It's called the Marshmellow Test. It's a test that's done, I think, usually on children, where they take a child and they put a marshmallow out in front of them on the table, and they say, you can eat that marshmallow right now if you want, but if you wait, and the period of time I think varies, but it's usually something like 15 minutes or an hour. If you wait, we'll give you 2 marshmallows. Okay, so the obvious thing to do here, if you like marshmallows, doesn't make sense if you don't like marshmallows, but if you like marshmallows, is to defer consumption, to wait, and then you can have twice as much marshmallow, basically for no, all you have to do is wait. There's no other effort involved. And young children especially have a very hard time with this, and I think the number 8 is. I'm not looking at the research right now. I think the number 8's coming in my head is the age where you start to get a lot of kids who realize that if they do defer consumption, if they wait and get twice as much marshmallow, that's a smart move. That's what they should do. But it's interesting because most adults will look at them like, obviously you should wait. Unless you're starving, you're about to die, you should, which is never the case in these experiments. You should wait. I believe they've even done, I mean, they couldn't actually do it, but like the longer, every day that you wait, you double the marshmallows. So it's like if you don't get 1 today, you get 2 tomorrow, you get 4 the next day, you get 8 the next day. Of course, that experiment would be impossible because after a couple days, there'd be more marshmallows than there are like atoms in the universe or whatever. But it's interesting to see how many adults would ridicule kids and say, look, they are being stupid. How can they not see? And that they have such so-called high time preference that they will eat that marshmallow now rather than work. But many of those same people, I think, are not going to draw the appropriate analogy to our current situation, because the people who are not working, yes, they're getting paychecks for doing nothing, but they're not getting skills. They're not moving up in the industry, and there's a cap. Like government subsidy for a worker is never going to be high. Government subsidies, if you're a capitalist, can be ridiculously high, right? If you're a capitalist, if you own a factory and you make something for the government, or you have a business where government regulations force people into your business, you can make billions. You can get billions in direct subsidies. You can get tens of billions in indirect subsidies, even more, if you're a capitalist. If you're a worker, we're talking about welfare checks. We're talking about small amounts that are far below what is achievable for almost everybody in the workforce. And here's the thing. They don't have raises and they don't have value. Another thing about capitalists, we can talk about parasite industries all day, and I will. I hate these capitalists, what they're doing. Sometimes they have less choice than others, but the idea that, they're making, when they have contracts with the government, those are ill-gotten gains as far as I'm concerned. But at least they're making something. Right? At least they're building a road. At least they're building some equipment. Unfortunately, that equipment very often is going to be used to kill people or whatever and to leech the taxpayers. But at least they have something that they can psychologically say that they did. If you're just getting welfare for nothing, then psychologically there's nothing. It's just like you're entitled to this because you're a loser. And that is a mentality. I remember listening to a radio interview where a woman, a welfare queen, called in a radio show, and she was like, look, it's free money for me. The government says that I'm entitled to it, so who are you to say that it's wrong? Government says that it's right, and they're the arbiter of what's right and wrong in society, right? They write the laws. They're the judges. They adjudicate everything, so they say it's okay, so it's okay. And wouldn't I be dumb to go out and work when they're going to give me so much? In her case, she had children, so she was probably getting more money. But not many people that philosophy of entitlement isn't one of achievement, though, right? What's her purpose? What's she going to live for? She obviously was. I want to say she's an idiot. There was a certain slyness there, but I would be amazed if she lived anything even half as fulfilled as she could. And most of you are not going to do that. So the rewards are, so it's the marshmallow test. You are taking a marshmallow now because you don't want to wait to get a paycheck every 2 weeks. You don't have to put in the effort, right? Your time preference is too much now that you can't put in 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. But let me just say, and this has always been true, for those of you who do want to work, now is a good opportunity. Get your foot in the door, get a better position than you could normally. Like my buddy at Walmart, they need managers and they can't hire anyone. So say you don't have managerial experience, but you're willing to work and you're willing to say, I'll do it. You can just leapfrog all those fuckers who are at home getting Biden's money, right? Stealing each other, picking each other's pockets. Now, I realize it's not so easy because you realize, well, if you're working, you feel like a bit of a rube because they're going to tax you. You're going to be losing some of that. You're going to be paying the people who aren't working. That feels stupid. But by working, you can, A, be fulfilled in the sense that you have like a purpose that's serving others, right, and being productive. But on top of that, in terms of, and rational self-interest does include things like your mental state and how happy you are to do something or not happy you are to do something. But even more than that, just financially speaking, you get ahead. So in 6 months or a year, whenever these checks run out or whatever happens, this game can't go forever. You're going to be up ahead with everybody else. You're going to be in a better position than the people who stayed home. You're going to make more than they made. And you're going to be the kid with the 2 marshmallows instead of the 1. But it is interesting to see what people in society are still 8-year-olds, right? There's a lot of people in this country, in many countries, I'm sure, who are 8-year-olds. They can't resist. And it doesn't help that the academia and the media are coddling them and telling them that it's great and that there's nothing wrong with it. And that it's not a sign of sloth or anything on their part. And unfortunately, that is true with almost all. Again, there is such a thing as worthy poor, people who really honestly can't work, and it's not their fault. It's one thing, of course, if you can't work because you're a drug addict or you're such an alcoholic that you can't hold it together for an hour. Okay, yeah, you can't work, but that's kind of as much your fault as anyone else's. But then there's other people who just have contracted horrible diseases, born with conditions where the victims of circumstance far beyond their control and they can't work. That happens, right? But that's not most people. Most of the people who are not working are choosing not to work. They're taking that free money, but in the end, that will lower how much they earn in their life. That will lower their standard of living, not only in material goods and in material wealth, but just in their psychic well-being, guaranteed. So if you're out there and you're not working, go and get a job. If you are working, try and get a better job. There's stuff out there. They're having a hard time hiring people. The complete breakdown. I mean, if you read The Tragedy of American Compassion, which is a book about welfare programs in the United States, government welfare programs they predate the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson. The Great Society gets a lot of credit for this because Lyndon Johnson was very, very eager to get as much credit as he could for everything. But many of those programs had antecedents going back decades, at least to the 50s, the Eisenhower era, if not before. But there was a very significant change in that period, and that change was a cultural one of this isn't something that, getting charity isn't something to be viewed as bad, right? If you're receiving charity, if you're on the dole, then that's something that you're just entitled to, and it's just like your right to vote, your right to free speech, your right to the dole, your right to receive government welfare. It's not actually charity in the strict sense. As a commentator I used to listen to a long time ago said, there's no such thing as forced philanthropy, right? If somebody donates you money and says, I want to give you this because for whatever reason, that's charity. If that money is taxed, it's not charity. It's a welfare program. If you want to make a hard-nosed argument for why welfare programs are good or why they're fine, but just don't call it charity. Call it something else. But in the 60s, it became not, you should get back to work, you need to work, and we're giving you this, but it's like, it's something that should eat at your dignity. It was, no, you're entitled to this and you should be proud. And these welfare bureaucrats started, the more people they could have on welfare, the better. So they weren't telling people, get off as soon as you can. They were, stay on as long as you can, get as many as you can, tell your friends. And that shift in the ideology, not of everyone. Look, there's still cultures in the United States that don't do it. There's lots of poor people in the United States, actually poor people, who don't take welfare, right? Because it just doesn't enter into their mind that they should. But that used to be a lot more common. So anyway, it sucks. These people who are refusing to work because the government's paying them, I think that they're stupid and they're short-sighted and they're selfish. That's for sure. But don't feel like an idiot if you're out there getting ahead, because you can get ahead now, right? There's however many millions of people, I'm not even sure, are choosing not to work. People who could work, that just means there's less competition for you, and those people still got to consume. So those dollars, they're being filtered through them, but they're going to spend all of it on consumption, right? These welfare people are not, these stimulus checks and shit, they're not going to capital goods. So, not directly. They're going to, indirectly, yes, because they're spending money. So the people who have the capital, they're ultimately getting the most. But anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. Quick little video. Don't fucking fail the marshmallow test. Don't be an 8-year-old. Get a job. And, yep. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.